Hi, I'm Marina Faith, and I'm here to tell you a story. So, there were a couple of things that converged at the same time to bring up this topic for me. This morning at church, the message was about the promises, the promise. And I guess there were promises, 5 promises that Jesus made, God made for all of us. And then a book that I just finished that I was reading with my sister. We've kind of gotten in a kick of late where we will read a book together and then it's sort of, remote book club the stories. And so this author is really great, Lynn Painter. We've enjoyed reading her books, and they're all kind of the young adult, sweet, romantic stories, and they're just lovely. Anyways, both of these two things together sort of reminded me of this topic, or sort of compounded on this topic, and it was about promises, accountability, and your word mattering. And so when I was younger, there were lots of times that my dad would say things to us, make, promises to us, and the likelihood that the thing he promised us would materialize was pretty slim. And I don't think he made promises to us with the intention of disappointing us. I think he really believed if he said it, that would be enough, like that God would make it happen because he said it. I don't believe that he always made promises to us with the intention of disappointing us or failing to follow through with things. I'm sure there were some times, I know there were some times where he promised things to us that he knew were not going to happen, or he would say things that were going to happen that were definitely not going to happen because he just did not want to deal with the consequences of that whatever not materializing. But a lot of the time, I really do believe it was, especially when I was younger, it was more about this sort of delusion that if you say it, it's just going to happen. Like, speak it into existence, instead of let me deal with what I can manage or control and speak to those things or make promises in accordance with that. But because of those experiences as a child, it created a lot of urgency for me as a parent to not follow in that pattern of behavior, because trust is so fundamental, and it takes a long time to build trust and almost no time to destroy it. And so it was important for me with my children to be very cautious and mindful about the things that I said or what I promised, because I wanted not to disappoint them, because I hated that feeling when I was a kid of being disappointed. Because, your parents are like on a bit of a pedestal as a child. They're your heroes of sorts. And when they disappoint you, and not just, occasionally, but repeatedly, it shatters a little bit of that trust over and over and again. And I think the hardest part of that is, as a child, you don't, no matter how old you are, you continue to crave that that positive outcome in those relationships, and it just doesn't always happen. And so it ties to the book that I was reading as well. In the book, Betting on You by Lynn Painter, in the book, the girl is going through navigating her parents' divorce, separation, and subsequent divorce. And for a season, her dad has kind of gone no contact with her. She had always been the one who was initiating contact, and then when she stopped, she just stopped interacting with him. And months had gone by, and he's pursuing another relationship, and her mom is pursuing another relationship. She's an only child, so here she is, sort of stuck in the middle of feeling like she doesn't belong. She's not tethered anymore. Her original nuclear family is now split to the wind, and she's hurting in the middle of that, because it's hard for her to reconcile who her dad was when she was a child to who he is now, post separation and divorce. And my kids, unfortunately, have gone through that experience of having their dad and I separate and divorce, and I hate that they have that life. Honestly, it makes me so sad for them, because I remember those seasons of disappointment when I was a kid and my parents were together. And I know the disappointment looks different, the disappointment of both of my parents aren't at all of these things at the same time, or, frustration that they have to go back and forth between houses. And I can't even imagine how hard that is. I mean, these are critical and fundamental development years. And instead of being in one place with the consistency that comes with that, they float between, they had done so week to week. Now it's just my son that's left in that mess. But at 15, he's got all these other things going on. He plays sports, and he's in high school, and he's transitioning in all of those ways. And he also has to deal with being at mom's house and then being at dad's house. And what if he forgets something one place or another place? And just, it hurts my heart that is the world they live in, that there wasn't a way to keep them from that, unfortunately. And so one of the things before any of that was part of their story, again, my commitment as a parent to be very intentional about what I said and what I did. And so to actually kind of an obnoxious degree, if I said it, it was. If I said no, it was no forever. If I said yes, come hell or high water, I was going to make it happen. And if for some reason there was something that was beyond my control to navigate that or make it come about, I would sit them down and take full ownership. I know I promised you this. I cannot do it. This is why. And it's either, we'll do this instead, or there's just nothing I can do about the situation that's outside of my control. This is what we'll do in the future. I'm sorry that I couldn't make this happen. But my kids fully understood that whatever mom said was what it was going to be. And there were, I'm human, so of course, I'm sure I've disappointed my kids in other ways. I'm confident they would be able to tell you that. But it hasn't been because I told them I would do something and didn't do it, or I told them something wasn't going to happen and it did happen. So again, kind of mindful about what I commit to, what I say, cautious about this. And I think it's interesting because I had life lessons that colored my view and ramped up my value in those clear and concise communications about things that I could control and could make happen or would prevent from happening. And they won't have that, but I hope they still glean from it the value and lessons that they have received, which is what mom says is going to happen. Mom's word can be trusted. That what I say and what I do match. So it goes back to, I think, character in a lot of ways, the importance of having good character where your word matters, you're accountable to what you say, you follow through. When they were little, and my oldest got kind of the worst of this, like, let's say we'd gone to the store and she decided to have just like an epic meltdown because, kids, they get overstimulated and they're tired and all the things. But she starts to melt down and gets belligerent. If I said, if you do this again, we're leaving, and she did it again, I would, even with a basket full of groceries, I would take it to the nearest person that worked at the store and say, I apologize, I need to leave now. And I would take her and go. And it was funny because she knew, like, kids know that you can that they can like work the angle, and we're going to sort of manipulate you into staying in a situation because that's what I want. And you're going to be embarrassed by my behavior, so you're going to give me the thing that I'm after. Oh no, poor Cheyenne. That was not her story. And because she's the oldest by 7 years, um, there were loads of opportunities where this came about, where we would be out and she would have just hit her max. And most of the time I would reflect as well. Did I sort of set her up for failure by putting her in that situation? And sometimes you don't get a say in it, right? I need to shop for groceries. She's going with me then. And if she's tapped out, I'm tapped out, right? Like, I get it, but also we can't behave that way. And so if I said, we're going to leave if you do this again, then we're going to leave. And the same was true with like consequences for her behavior. If she did something and that meant we weren't going to do the other fun thing, like I had fun things planned for the weekend, but now she behaved in a way that wasn't okay, well, then we weren't doing the thing. Even if I really wanted to do the thing, to my own detriment, I would not do the thing because I needed to stand firm on what I say is what it is, always. And so it was harder to do that when I had all three kids in the scene, because some things I didn't quite have the same flexibility to just drop what I was doing and leave. Like, if we're at a volleyball game for Cheyenne when she was in junior high and high school, I can't just leave her game because one of the other ones has lost their ever-loving mind. Like, we're going to have to stay, but also there's going to be a problem later because are you for real? So I wouldn't say, well, we're going to leave if you do this again, because I know we're not going to leave. I'm going to have to stay. Did give them a little bit of power that I wish they didn't have. But, that's the whole thing of certainly toddlerhood, trying to assert your power because, the whole world is out of your control. You just want something that's your own. But it reminded me again as I was reading through that book, and that trustworthiness and presence and being present. And so when my ex-husband and I separated and then divorced, it was hugely important to me that no matter what was going on, I was there. So if they had a thing at school, and I'm fortunate, it's not just good fortune, but again, sort of intentionality and purposefulness to choose jobs where I would have that flexibility, that the things that were going on with my kids are my priority to be present for as much as possible. There are things that I've missed, but as much as I could be present for, I was there. And so my son, again, being the last in the house, there's more flexibility for me to be at his things, to be at his games and what have you. And as I said, like, went to his game the day after I had surgery. There was no way I wasn't going to be there. And if there's anything that I can be present for, I'm there for. I have plans this next week. We're supposed to be traveling, and I was looking forward to the travel plans as they were originally designed, but they were made way before I had his baseball schedule, and way before they jammed 2 more games into this final week of baseball because of a rain out and then umpire issues, whatever. So now instead of it being 2 games and I was going to miss 1, it's 4 games and I'm going to miss 2. So I had to rearrange my schedule. And when I asked my son, it was so funny because, he's 15 and he's too cool. I'm like, whatever. He loves his mother, but also he's 15 and he's too cool. Hey, I'm supposed to be out of town. Do you want me to try and move things around so that I could at least be at one of the games? And he's like, it's fine, it's whatever. But at the beginning of the season, when I mentioned to him, hey, I'm going to miss the last week of games because I'm due to be out of town, he's so programmed and used to mom is everywhere, like a shadow. But mom will be there because I have a thing, mom will be there. He's so used to this that he kind of looked at me like, are you for real? He will change your plans. Well, it's a family trip with my husband's siblings, and we go on these every couple of years. And we've made these plans more than a year ago. It's not just me. I need to go on this trip. Fine, Mom, I guess. You're just going to leave me the last week of baseball. I mean, you would have thought it was his senior year, and I was abandoning him. Not that anything is less important, but he had massive advance notice. The second I had the schedule, I saw the conflict and told him, hey, we have a problem. Because I had already told him, again, you know, my word being true, I'll be at all of your games, no matter where they're at in the valley. Okay, that's great. And then I look at the schedule. Once we get the schedule, okay, I have a problem. I'm going to be out of town for some of the last week of the season. Like, what are you talking about? Well, reschedule your plans because you're going to be at every one of the games. So it's a beautiful thing that we have a relationship that's strong enough that he wants me to be at these things, even though, again, he's in his too cool phase. But also, I'm glad that he knows, well, Mom, you said, which means I'll be there until I tell you differently. So I did rearrange my plan, so I'll only miss 2 of his games. It will mean a whole lot less sleep for me, which I'm a little sad about because of the flight schedule options being rather limited. But, you know, these are the things that you do. And I think about that as I was reading that story. You know, it's hard for kids who are in that situation of separation and divorce to still feel like they matter in the same way they mattered when they were in the structure of the nuclear family with both mom and dad in the same house. And not that that's universally true, right? Because like you can have an absent parent while your parents are still married and in the same house technically, and you still don't feel like both parents are really there for you. But you do feel more detached, I think, when you're in that split environment, especially once your parents either are dating somebody else or get married to somebody else. It starts to feel a little bit more fractured for the kids. And so reminded me to just like check back in with each of them, even though the girls are older, 26 and 19, making sure they still feel, and I did a lot of that when my husband and I were dating, like, are you still feeling like we're connected? Do you feel like I've let you down with this? Because that sort of implied promise in my mind, the implied promise of presence for your children is really important. And I want them to have healthy relationships in adulthood because they felt confident as children that they were loved and cared for and prioritized. And I think failing to, or disappointing them by failing to fulfill those obligations of presence can wreak havoc on future relationships. Because I think that it played a bit of a role for me in having ridiculously low expectations of others, where like you would trip over the expectations, they were so low, instead of raising the bar significantly and saying, this is what I'm worthy of, this is what I deserve. I'm a person that should have promises fulfilled too, and I'm a person that's worthy of showing up for always in all of the things. And truthfully, like, childhood was real different when I was a kid. It wasn't as big a deal necessarily, and like my mom always worked, and she was at a lot of things when I was younger, but once I got into like junior high and high school, her work schedule was much less flexible. It was harder to be at certain things that I was a part of, and so that was certainly a factor in presence. But it just reminded me, because that book sort of broke my heart in some of those ways of thinking about what that looks like for my kids and their lives, making sure that I'm being very intentional. And like the mom in the story has a really close relationship with the daughter, and I want that for each of my kids, that we would have a close enough relationship that they could tell me, instead of what she was doing, sort of people pleasing and not saying like, hey, I need more of you or whatever. I hope my kids, and I open those conversations. I invite the conversation. I invite that criticism. Hey, this is what I'm seeing of the situation, but you know, what do you think about it? And that goes a long way, but it also has to do with how I respond when they do give me feedback that I wish I wasn't getting. Like, yeah, you really bummed me out with that, or you know, you not doing this was really disappointing. And I've had a lot of those conversations with my oldest, fewer with the other two, but I continue to offer the same. Like, if I'm failing to meet your needs or expectations, if you're frustrated with me, I would so much rather you just told me so that I could do something about it, or maybe explain better where I was at. And the funny thing too, one of the parts of the story that I just found really stark, obvious overlap for me. The mom is dating somebody for a long time, but the daughter doesn't know. So for her, when things escalate in the relationship between the mom and mom's new boyfriend, it seems too sudden. And she's thinking, what the heck is going on? And then the boyfriend confesses that actually they were seeing each other for more than a year beforehand, and they just didn't want to disrupt her life in case things didn't last. They didn't want it to be an upheaval. And while I understand and appreciate that, because yes, you don't want people messing with your kids' peace and sanctuary, I think it's important for them to know what's going on. And so I took a very radical other route. My kids knew after my first date with my now husband, I'm dating somebody. I've met someone, we're going to be dating. I wanted you to know, I wanted you to hear it from me. I'm not necessarily asking you to like jump on board with this, but I wanted you to hear it from me from the beginning. And, you know, that is the style of relationship we have. It's not for everybody, obviously, but that was really important to maintain trust and reliability. Again, what mom says and what mom does, they match. And so those promises, that reliability, that character is what I also try to teach them. Say what you mean and mean what you say. If you say you're going to do something, then you better do it. And if you say you're not going to do something, then don't. And let's have conversations if we're not on the same page in one way or another. So anyways, it was just something that I was thinking about today with that message. That was cool. Just like totally smacked the camera. Anyhow, so come back again. I'll tell you another story. I hope you have a happy Easter. Bye.